Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, welcome to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
What a fun time. It continues to be an exciting time. Bitcoin made a new all-time high today and yesterday. We're down a little bit from it, but we're down to 93.7.
I know. God forbid.
What's it feel like to you in the market?
It feels like there is maximum euphoria. I think most folks that are in Bitcoin are pretty stretched in terms of their positioning.
Something like 99.5% of all Bitcoin UTXOs are in profit.
Yes.
So
everybody's in profit. And the main story really is with respect to Michael Saylor. Obviously, they are buying a ton of Bitcoin.
He's ahead of schedule, even from what he said.
He's
just
way ahead of
ago.
schedule, and the stock has been trading really well, and it looks like he's going to be able to do more.
Yeah,
and more in a quicker manner as well.
That's what he's telegraphing. It's what he's saying. It's he's all over the internet.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We ran this too. Not to. None of this is investment advice, but MicroStrategy, I think, is the top risk-adjusted, best Sharp ratio.
I think it's got a Sharp around like
over
6.
4. Over 4 is what we saw, but that's just year to date. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. It's like the best performing stock out there. It's large, traded like $15 billion.
MicroStrategy owns more than 1.5% of all the Bitcoin today.
Yeah, and that's a great thing because they don't sell.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's a lot of folks that are paying attention to the Saylor story and the MicroStrategy story. Bitcoin has broken all-time highs. It's seeing follow through. Clearly, the Trump administration is much more pro-crypto than the last administration.
Mm-hmm.
And the officials that have been appointed and the folks that influence him the greatest seem to be folks that are invested in the, not the success per se, but in the legal viability and pathway and clarity that crypto really needs.
That's right.
And so, I think things are looking really good for Bitcoin. I would just caution that there is definitely resistance at 100K. We see it in the order books. It's a nice big round number. And so, if folks are a bit cautious, I definitely think that 100K level should hold on the first test at the very least.
Yeah.
And subsequently thereafter, we'll see what happens. I do think, you're probably talking about a Bitcoin price north of 100K for 2025.
Yeah.
But inside of 2024, I think breaking that 100K level is going to be challenging.
Yep, I think that's right. I think obviously on a longer time frame, I think the nothing stops this train. It feels like we're going much higher. I think you see this priced in the Bitcoin ETF options launched and tons of volume around the 100K calls and on higher spikes than
absolutely.
that. So people are anticipating higher prices, but yeah, it does feel like you can't what more positive news can we really get at this point?
No, absolutely.
So it's kind of hard to see what,
There's a lot of optimism baked in.
Yeah, there is. There is.
And that's, if you look at the traditional markets, right, stocks ripped right after the Trump election on hopes of, deregulation and tax cuts.
Yep.
And they've reverted back a ton since. And so, when you have crowded positioning, that leads to some vulnerability. And so, I definitely think that there's some, signs that are flashing a bit red at the moment, basis being one of them. So we've seen elevated funding levels for a while now in crypto, and, spots at the dead highs. Vols, longer dated stuff starting to pick up a little bit as well with some of the, the options activity.
Yeah.
But yeah, can we also talk about how we now have options?
I know.
Publicly traded options, no credit, OCC credit risk.
It's crazy because, Galaxy, one of the biggest options dealers in the world, but over the counter only does, and us and our competitors in that market only service institutional investors, really.
Yeah.
American retail investors make up 44% of all equity options activity. So almost half. Shout out to Kelly Greer for pulling that stat. They've had no way to do options on Bitcoin at all in the U.S. in general.
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah,
CME options, right? But that's, I think, also basically institutional only.
the CME is institutional only. You can buy
There was
options on
Ledger
the
X.
ETF that holds the futures.
The futures ETFs had options.
Yes.
That was the only real way.
The only real way.
But now it's like, I mean, you know,
Direct access.
you're probably going to get these in like fintech apps, like Robinhood will probably be adding this. I would just assume, right? They do tons of business on, right? They were huge on meme coins. Dogecoin at one point was like most of their revenue, or at least half of their revenue back in 21.
Absolutely.
They love right, all that GameStop trading was on Robinhood, a lot of it, right? So I think that's not even, I don't even think that's the biggest story about the ETF options, but it's a big part of it. Retail can trade these options now.
No, and retail, as you correctly highlighted, has a huge influence on this market. And so I think it's fundamentally, it is a positive catalyst for Bitcoin because it also introduces hedging capabilities for U.S. investors. They can sell calls, they can buy puts.
Makes it more attractive to hold the ETF.
Absolutely.
Also, it reduces volatility or lets them take bigger position sizes because they can hedge and stuff, right?
Correct. And it enhances liquidity generally because the options market makers have to buy and sell a ton more spot. So the market becomes more liquid from a spot standpoint when you have the options. And, you know, more folks will look at it because they can hedge stuff and speculate a little bit easier. So yeah, this is a very positive, you know, development for the market, and I think you're correctly right in highlighting Robinhood activities because, you know, I think last week they recently allowed, you know, tokens that they had been more cautious on to list on their platform, and so with this upcoming change in the SEC, I think you'll start to see more tokens kind of being listed. By Coinbase, by Robinhood, and other exchanges that offer access to retail. So all in all, I mean, these are very healthy, constructive developments. I think Bitcoin would certainly be higher right now, though, if you didn't have some of these geopolitical tensions going on in the market.
Yep.
I think those are, you know, front of mind for a lot of investors right now. You know, basically the latest is over the past 2 days, Ukraine has launched long-range missiles into Russia, and Russia has responded by being like, "This is not good," and you know the nuclear threat.
They updated their nuclear usage threat and stuff. Yeah,
yeah, and you know there were some headlines out overnight being like, you know, Putin's open to a ceasefire if you draw the borders, you know, as they're currently constructed, et cetera. And so I think there's some openness to negotiating with the U.S. once the Trump administration is in.
Yeah.
But for the time being, the Ukrainians are escalating.
Yeah, which is rational, unfortunately, because when you have, I think that the Trump team has pretty explicitly implied, I know that's explicit, implicit, that they would work towards a negotiated settlement. And so now you've got like a ticking clock, right? And you effectively want in any sort of negotiation to go in with the strongest hand possible.
Absolutely.
So they assume that like
theory,
day one, so you could expect some, I would say, heightened tensions between now and the Trump administration taking office.
No, absolutely. And you're seeing that take hold in currency markets pretty aggressively. Euro is back down to almost 105, the figure, which is like crisis, like initial Russian invasion,
one
like
being
euro
parity
through parity.
with the dollar.
Yeah. So you're 5% away from parity.
Wow.
With the dollar, and so you know, like that's a big deal.
That shows a lot of concern. Over there.
A ton of concern.
Yeah.
In that market, and so.
Well, keep your eye on the geopolitics, and you know, don't everybody stay safe out there. I guess we're getting a crazy, volatile. I mean, it's vol up, spot up is the regime we've been in since the election, but you know, we'll keep following it.
Brilliant.
Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.